I've had people like straight up cuss me out because I'm a Christian and just call me like just the most absurd things because I believe in a God who's not all inclusive.
Right.
Like, yes, God is love, but God also has a set of standards.
Welcome to the Snipe Life. We're trying something new, and for you, our patrons, you're receiving this way early. So if you're not a patron, I really, encourage you to sign up, help us out, and to help us to do more fun things like this. This is a podcast. And so what does that mean? It means that we're just going to sit down with our friends and talk about stuff. So as you guys know, probably, my name's Brandon, and these are our amazing friends, the Parkers. This is my wife, Vanessa, of course. And as we jump in today, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. And the reason why we want to do this podcast is because, well, on our main channel, we really want to talk about a lot of serious things in depth, but it's just not very great to do on our main channel, because our main channel, we talk about The Chosen, we talk about Christian media. And so we wanted a place where we could really dive deep and speak candidly and speak truthfully about a lot of the issues that are going on in the world. So this episode, even from the very beginning, it's going to be pretty heavy, but I want to talk about it because I think it's important for our culture. I think it's important for people to see how Christians think in general. And so as we jump into this, just keep in mind, like, hey, we may be wrong about some stuff. We may think differently than you, and that's totally okay. And I want you to, voice your concerns and your comments in the comments below, and let us know what you think about our discussion today. And as we jump in, let's just introduce ourselves. So, who are you guys?
We are the Parkers. Obviously, we're friends of you guys. Been Floridian. Jaycie hasn't been a Floridian for too very long. She moved down from Indiana prior to us getting married. That's how we met. She was down for college, but I've lived in Florida all my life. So, and this is my beautiful wife, Jaycie.
Awesome. Who are you?
I'm Jaycie. Like
Best
said,
known from My Friends Watch The Chosen.
Yeah.
Yes. I came from Indiana, and I live here, and these are my favorite friends. So.
Awesome. And then, of course, my beautiful wife, Vanessa. You want to say a little bit about yourself?
No. Y'all know me. It's Vanessa. And which camera are we on? That's confusing the crap out of me.
It's right there. You're on it there.
Hello.
You don't look at the camera. We're just having a discussion.
Okay.
Podcast. We're learning podcasts.
You know me.
Yeah.
Yeah. They know me. I don't need to.
Yeah, no worries. So today we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy stuff. We're going to be diving into a documentary that was on the Daily Wire. Now, we wanted to show you guys this documentary because we thought it was really interesting when we watched it.
Yeah.
And it came out a little while ago. It's called What is a Woman? And so the whole premise of the movie is it's a documentary kind of discovering the ideas of transgenderism and what is a woman in today's world, because it just seems like people can't define that word for whatever reason, and because of the transgender issues and everything that's going on, it's become a real big contention among people in general. And being in the Christian space that we're in, it's like, we have a very biblical view of transgenderism, of homosexuality, and all of that. And so for us, this documentary is really eye-opening to see the other side of that and to see how they really think and how they kind of, work in the world. What did you guys think about the documentary overall?
Mind-blowing. Honestly, crazy. Like, I knew that it was, like, around and it's everywhere, but I didn't know that it was, like...
Right.
Like that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that crazy.
Yeah, I knew, I definitely, like, being in the world we're in today, like, it's so common now. Like, I can remember going back to high school days, which really isn't that long ago, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Back whenever the whole LGBTQ transgender movement was kind of starting. And sadly, a lot of it has started kind of like my junior, 2 year of high school. I really started noticing, like, junior year of high school, I really started noticing, like, like obviously every once in a while prior to, in middle school or whatever, you'd see, one, gay couple or whatever it is, around or whatever. But it really started becoming prevalent. And I remember the first transgender kid at our school, I actually had a class with him my sophomore year. And I came into my math class junior year, and he was sitting across the room from me, and he was just kind of like staring at me. And it was kind of like, whoa, did this guy I went to school with last year have a sister I didn't know about? And they like look alike, or
right.
like it that's how early on it was, where it was like, I really don't understand this right now.
Yeah.
And then after that, like slowly, like obviously we ended up talking, and it was kind of like a really awkward and just like, what is going on? Because it was the first time I had really hopped into that and seen it firsthand. And he was like, yeah, over summer I was really finding out who I was, and I wanted to transition to a woman. He was wearing a dress and, makeup, and put a hairband in his hair, and he had long hair sophomore year, but he hadn't cut it at all over summer, and he had just let it grow out. And it was just kind of like, that was the first moment where I was like, whoa, like this is real.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, it just started, it was like a snowball effect. Like, it just started tumbling.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the transgender side, but the whole aspect of the LGBTQ community in a whole. So.
Yeah, it's actually super interesting. There was an article that came out, I think it was earlier this week, maybe a couple days ago, and it was from a gay man, right, who is writing to the LGBTQ community, and basically saying, like fighting against them. It was really interesting because he brought up like this whole understanding of like why didn't we stop back in 2015 when gay marriage became legal and we got what we wanted? We got equality, right? Like, why didn't we stop then? But it wasn't enough, and now you're like pushing so far to the point of like drag queens doing story time in elementary schools and doing burlesque dances in front of these elementary school kids, and grooming kids to become transgender, grooming kids to become homosexual when they're not, right? And so this like person who's coming from obviously a different side than us, like a homosexual man, is still like, he understands like this is wrong, like where you guys are going, like this is the insane side of the community. And from his point of view, I think he was saying like this is a minority, and that the general LGBTQ like community, like some of them are actually sane, right? And they actually have like logical thought in a way, right? Now we're coming from the Christian side of things, right, which is completely different. Because we believe that homosexuality is a sin, that it's not how God created us to be. And in a perfect world, there wouldn't be any homosexuality. There wouldn't be any transgenderism, because God created us to be who we're supposed to be, right? But this puts us in a really weird position because it's exclusivity, right? When the world preaches inclusivity all the time. And so in this documentary, Matt Walsh, he's able to interview a ton of different people. One of my favorites was, there's a couple of them that are really interesting to me, but there was a pediatrician that he interviewed that was really scary to me. And so she essentially was saying throughout this interview that that a child can decide to be transgender at any point in their life. I mean, how did you guys respond to that interview there?
I don't know. For me, it's just like, how can you can't even decide what you want for breakfast. Like, how can you decide to do this with your whole entire life, like for the rest of your life? Because, I mean, I don't know everything about it, but I think once you are there, you can't go back. I don't know though, but
there's
like,
definitely some points to that for sure.
Yeah.
Like what they were saying in the interview, like she's prescribing Lupron, and this drug is something that we use for pedophiles to chemically castrate them so they can't commit sexual offenses anymore. And it's like, ugh, that's so crazy to me. Yeah, exactly.
On a kid.
Yeah, it's insane. What were some of your favorite parts of the documentary?
Well, there's just a lot of stuff that you've already said that I want to kind of jump back into.
Yeah, let's do it.
Like how, like, it's the minority, right? Like, I was just watching a video where they were saying, like, it could be 1% of people that are wanting to start a war or something, right? Like,
yeah, right.
And then there's another 1% that wants to, and then they make the voices known, and so that 1% starts growing, and so what you start creating is like basically a civil war, right?
Yeah.
It was
mass division.
Yeah. So it's like, why is that their goal? You know, is that their goal? Like, you know, because it's just crazy. Like, why are you trying to force this down kids' throats? Like, why are you trying to make people become something they're not? Right. You know?
Yeah, and we think about it from a massive point of view, right? From a 5,000-foot view, like, this is Satan, right?
Yeah.
And so everything boils down to good versus evil.
Yeah.
And we believe, right, that God created the world and it was good, but then it began to be corrupted by sin. True. And so as sin enters the world, things keep on happening and things get worse and worse and worse. And like you're saying, like, that example is from the Muslims, where there's two different types of Muslims, right?
Yeah.
So there's one type of Muslim that hates the other type of Muslim. And even if there's just 1% that hate each other, then eventually it corrupts and it affects everybody else.
Right.
And so within our world, right, the division that's being caused, especially in the United States, right, over everything, it eventually gets to the point where you're almost forced to pick a side. Have you guys felt that way?
Oh, absolutely. I think, well, I mean, you even see it now, like, becoming a Christian nowadays is so much harder than becoming a Christian 10 years ago, right? Because there's not this division. Like, before it was, yes, we're supposed to be set apart, but, you know, the world that we live in America, it's very, you know, we're one of the freest countries, right? And we're very free to believe whatever we want to believe. There wasn't a ton of, like, condemnation from the world from at least from my point of view. There definitely wasn't as much condemnation from the world back then as there is today. And I think that is definitely has a lot to do with a lot of these main issues of abortion and transgender. Like, those seem to be the two, like, main issues of like I see Christians post online all the time of like, oh, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe everything in the Bible, kind of a thing. And it's like, that's not
right.
to tell you, that's not how it works at all.
No,
But yeah, I mean, I've had people, you know, just in the last 5 years, when I've really started finding out who I was in Christ and really started growing my relationship with Christ, really say some awful things to me that I had never heard prior. And maybe it's just because I wasn't living my life like I'm living my life now prior.
Right.
If that makes sense. But, I've had people, like, straight up cuss me out because I'm a Christian and just call me, like, just the most absurd things because I believe in a God who's not all-inclusive.
Right.
Right? Like, yes, God is love, but God also has a set of standards that as Christians we must live by.
Right.
You know, it talks about our fruits. You know, we'll basically be known by our fruits. Or do we have good fruit? Do we have bad fruit? You know, that will give you a kind of a peek into what our inner heart posture is, you know, as we always say. But yeah, I mean, I've seen a bunch of people in the last 5 years kind of just either push me away, you know, or you start talking about something and then they find out your stance on things, and then they slowly start distancing themselves from you just for this one stance, right? Specifically abortion. Yeah. For me, that's been a huge one where I've told people my stance on abortion, and I could see them either completely turn off at that moment and then slowly start just drifting away, whether we had a friendship or not. It's sad, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to jump into Roe v. Wade and stuff in a bit, but I think this Matt Walsh documentary is really interesting to me in the way that, like, people won't even look at it. Like, if you look on Rotten Tomatoes, you know, the site where people will rate movies, right? There are 4 critic scores on the whole entire thing, right? When normally there's dozens and dozens and dozens because people refuse to watch it even because they've heard who it's by and they heard what it's about, right? But the consumer score is almost 100%. So it's like it's a very like vast difference, right? Where they emailed dozens and dozens of critics to be like, hey, if you'd like to, watch our movie and give us a score, we'd love to have that. And they got dozens of emails back just like being like, screw you, and I'm never watching this, you bigot, and like, yelling at them, like cussing them out or whatever. Like it's really strange to me. And it's like, you're so open-minded and you're so inclusive until it comes to something like this, where it's just like, why? Like, why won't you even take a look at it?
Right.
Like, it's very strange to me. And Matt Walsh said something on Dr. Phil, which Bryce loves Dr. Phil. That was really funny to me. He's talking to basically two transgender individuals that are kind of like leaders in the space. And he starts to talk and he's like, someone called his view radical, right? Which is like the standard view of like, men should be men, women should be women. And he's like, how is my view radical? Like, when everything else just popped up like 5 minutes ago, like how is that possible? It's like, it's so crazy to me how quickly things shifted, like without anybody having control over it. Just like this group just flourished and came out. And it's so crazy to me. And let me set this straight too, because I don't want to come across as, I'm sure we're going to get comments of like transphobe, whatever, but like I love trans people. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I love trans people, and I love who they are. I love who God made them to be. And for me, you have to understand, if I truly believe in God and if I truly am living a life of Christianity and I'm walking in that, then what you are doing to my God is you're spitting in his face, right? And so for me, how would you expect me not to react the way that I'm reacting? How would you expect me not to react in a way that's like hurt by that, saddened by that? Because not only are you spitting in my God's face, but you're not going to receive the reward that he's offering to you. Right. You're not receiving the beautiful life that he's trying to give you.
He actually made you to be, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so for us, we're coming from that point of like, man, it just makes me so sad. Like, I'm so upset by what people are doing to themselves. And then on top of it, it makes me mad whenever they start to groom others, right?
Right.
And we've seen this story many, many times when people get on Tumblr or they get on different sites, and these groups start to groom them to the point where they're buying like binders for them, which is like, a binder is a piece of equipment that basically is used to like strap up your boobs, basically to make it so you look more like a man. And people will go into these different chat rooms and groups and stuff, and they begin to be groomed into this to where, before they had no inclination of becoming transgender. They had no inclination of being part of this community. And then all of a sudden, because these people are the ones that are accepting them, because these people are the ones that are treating them the nicest, they kind of jump into it feet first and, give everything to it. I don't know.
From the outside looking in, it may look like, especially when I'm with fellow Christians, right? Because I feel open enough to talk about this stuff. Where in the world, we're like shunned. You don't talk about this stuff. So like, I like that you brought that up, that we do love, right? We do love. We are only talking about this because we love. Yeah. Right? You should be the person that God made you to be and embrace that. Yeah. But the God that he made you to be is not this God, this person that you, or what did I say? The person that he made you to be, that the person that God made you to be is not a fairy tale. You know what I mean? Like, it's who you are, And that goes beyond sex, too. It goes beyond gender. It goes beyond all of it. Like, even me in my life, there are times when I run away from God's purpose for me, and I feel the negative effects of that, right? The reason why this is so much more important to a lot of people is because this is like a permanent change, right? Like, where if you're getting a double mastectomy when you're 16 years old, and then when you're 25, you realize it was a mistake. Yeah. You can't just get those back, Like, what if you want to breastfeed your child? It's not going to happen, right? What if you want to have a normal kind of body as you grow up into a woman? Like, forever your body is changed, and forever it's self-harm. It is 100%. And another thing, this is probably the last point I'll make about the documentary, but again, Matt is talking to a physician, right? A transgender physician that does these surgeries for transgender people, and as he's speaking to him,
they basically have this conversation where he's saying, okay, well, what about these people who believe that they need an arm amputated because they want to identify as a disabled person, right? And the doctor's like, well, I think that's, how would you say it, kooky, right? And Matt's like, so you don't see any correlation between the two? And she's like, no. It's like just the strangest thing to me.
Yeah, it goes back to you're willing to live the lie so hard that you look absolutely stupid.
Right.
Like, the correlation between those two is so blatantly obvious that a 5-year-old could see it, right? The fact that transgender people would want, to take their junk and cut it off. It's no different than an arm.
Yeah. No
different, right?
Yeah.
It's and it blows my mind that people are willing to go to the lengths of, like, no, I still believe that. Like, even, like, you see it in interviews and different things all the time of people that, like, stop people on the beach, and they end up following this lie all the way down this rabbit hole to where they look so dumb sitting on this interview but they're still like, nope, I said that, so I need to stay with it the whole time. Even though in their mind, you can tell they're going, I know this is not right. Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
I feel like in the documentary, I can't remember what it said, but they interviewed somebody and they're like, so if I say you're not standing in front of me, even though you are, you're not standing in front of me. And she was like, I guess if that's what you want to think, like,
that's your truth.
Like,
that's following that down the rabbit hole.
How does that work? Like, if I think I'm an elephant wearing glasses, am I an elephant wearing glasses? Like, I don't understand how that mindset is just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It sounds crazy to us now, but there are also children in class right now that are acting as dogs and cats. And they have the teacher has to address them as if they are that thing, right? So, like, this is the world that we're living in, and we hear the phrase a lot, like clown world, right? Like this is like, it's so strange to me where we're going, and this is going to evolve, right? We're hearing now about MAPS, which is minor attracted persons, right? So they're trying to normalize pedophilia, right? Which is going to lead then to maybe animalistic sexuality and all that comes with that, and a lot of different things that are going to morph into more and more and more, right? And we know that this is going to happen because, like, sin, that's what it does. It just infects and it moves and it keeps on going, right? We're going to just see more and more of it for sure.
Yeah. I was trying to think about, when you asked us about doing the podcast and things, like, what I feel is the end goal of the movement, right? Because, like we were talking about before, like, you have this one person who's like, guys, we got what we wanted. We made gay marriage legal, whatever. Was that before we had cameras rolling?
No. That was we talked about.
Okay, so, like, you have this guy who's like, guys, we got what we wanted. We don't need any more than this, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like this agenda keeps getting pushed further. So it's just going to get more and more radical. Like, I feel like in the next 5 years, we're going to look back and say that is nothing compared to where we are now, and the end goal is pedophilia. Yeah. And it's disgusting. And it's, to think that a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old can go into a doctor's office right now in Canada, right? Like, there's a guy who is literally being arrested and he's out on bail right now.
Yeah, that's insane.
Because his daughter wants to transition and he's not letting her, or he doesn't want to let, like, he's trying everything.
The state's allowing it past his permission.
He's doing everything in his power to stop it. So for that reason, he's being arrested, right? Yeah. And I can't even imagine, how many times, like when I was little, I was like, man, I want to be this, whether not anything along these lines, but, and my mom's like, no, or I want to do this, I want to jump off the roof of a house with a blanket over my head and parachute down. Like, your 5-year-old brain does not grasp the concept of what you're about to do, right? I'm going to flow down because I saw it in Buzz Lightyear, right? I'm going to jump off the roof. We're going to come down. Everything's going to be fine. You just cannot, you have a 5-year-old that can completely change the way his body is going to morph over the rest of his life, right? And then you have people like we can't drink till we're 21 because we're not responsible enough, or we can't vote till we're 18 because we don't want people with undeveloped brains, you know, even though your brain's not even fully developed till 25,
Right.
voting people into office. Because if we had a 5-year-old voting people into office, they'd be voting Barney or, you know, whatever it is. Like, the view on it is so radical either way, right? Like, we will let kids change the way that their whole life is going to be from here on out, because they're like the woman who transitioned to a man in the documentary. She can't go back. She is dying from the fact that she had those surgeries. Yeah. She is having infection upon infection that is going to kill her. And she says that. She says, this was the worst decision I've ever made. And this is what they're not telling you. They're not telling you that I am dying from infections from these surgeries. Yeah. I am dying because all the pills that I took are going to give me cancer. She even says, like, hey, 10 years on these pills is going to give you cancer. And here we are giving 10-year-olds these hormone transition pills, you know, and we're giving them to them acting like everything's going to be okay in 10 years, when in 10 years we know that they're going to have cancer. And that's, you know, talking about that pediatrician. Yeah. That to me is like, a pediatrician is supposed to be someone who helps. Right. They are there to protect kids, help kids through things that are going on in their bodies, right? And for them to know that they're giving a 10-year-old pills that we use to castrate pedophiles, and that be okay with them, it really scares me, right? Yeah. And it scares me because she, the whole time, said there's nothing wrong with anything that you've said, right? Even though it is so beyond my mind how that can be okay. You know, it just blows my mind. So
yeah, I definitely encourage you guys, if you get a chance, to check out the documentary. I think it's really good, and there's a lot of insight. There's even a portion where he goes to Africa and speaks to a tribe in Africa, and that was really funny and really interesting to see how they think. And how, you know, if this is a Western construction of us, you know, having male and female, why isn't it anywhere else, right? Yeah. And so it's really interesting to think about those kind of things and dive into that. Let's jump into Roe v. Wade. This is something that happened a week ago, right? A little over a week ago. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. This is a law that's been in place for about 50 years, or a standard that's been in place for about 50 years, where the federal government can legalize abortion, right? But now abortion is not gone, right, which a bunch of people are freaking out about, but it's actually up to the states. So each state gets to decide. Now that means that about a dozen or so states automatically eliminated abortion, period. And then other states stayed the exact same as they were, such as California and New York. You can basically abort a baby the day before they're born, and it's perfectly fine. And then there's other states that are kind of in the middle, like Texas and Florida, where there's still abortions, but certain things are limiting that, right? So what are your thoughts on Roe v. Wade and all of that?
Well, it just made me think, like, something Bryce said. It's like you can't even teach your kids. Sorry, there's a few things that I have.
No, you're good.
I'm writing things down because you keep going. Anyway, so like you can't even teach your kids nowadays. Yeah. So, and that made me think, where's the common sense? There isn't any anymore. Even with Roe v. Wade, right? Like, what? Like, you're allowed to kill people? It just doesn't make sense, because
you're allowed to do whatever you want now,
right? And it just it's the inconsistency, like you were saying as well. Like, we need to be tolerant, but nobody's tolerant of Christians, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. Inconsistency, and then I can do whatever I want with my body, but you're not letting a baby. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just so inconsistent. That's my biggest takeaway for everything. It's just the world is becoming. You know how he says in Romans that he'll let us. What is it? A debased mind. Yeah.
And I was going to bring that up too. I think Romans 1 is the verse that keeps on coming to mind for all of this stuff for me and Vanessa. And so we've had this conversation like a ton over the last few months, where it's like Romans 1, Romans 2, like the whole section there where Paul's talking about like how God gives people up to what they want, right? And for this situation specifically, I think of two different verses. One is the one that you just said, where he's going to give them up to a debased mind because they want that, right? They want whatever they want, and so God's like, okay, I'll give it up to you. You can have it, right?
Yeah, like
you can fall into that.
Like the pediatrician. Like, how are you think that's inconsistent to me?
Right.
Like, medical, like you went to medical school, you know what I mean? You know what you're doing.
Yeah, you put feelings above science.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the second verse that I think about in Romans is the one where he says, claiming to be wise, they became fools, right? And so in this, we see that like constantly, and it's this idea where like people, they claim that they're so smart and they know what's right, and they know that, you know, if you feel it, then that's what's right. And it's just so strange to me that this has become the norm for some people in the world. And I wanted to do this podcast because I think that there's a lot of people that agree with us, but they're way too afraid to talk about it in this way. And maybe we'll get backlash. Maybe we'll get put on the news and people will start hating us and we'll get canceled. And maybe YouTube won't even show this. Maybe YouTube won't even show this video, you know, when we release it past our Patreon eventually. Yeah. You know, maybe they won't even spread it anywhere. And that's what I expect, right? I expect the world to fight against what God wants, right? Yeah. And what God wants is good. It's not this evil thing where we're trying to shut people down. It's not an evil thing where we're trying to, you know, make people unhappy. The truth is that feelings don't dictate what God is. The feelings don't dictate what good is, right? And so often in our world today, we're falling into this thing where, man, people let their feelings and what makes them feel pleasure, what makes them feel happy or whatever, right? Instead of pursuing what is good, what is the best thing, they're pursuing what is good for that moment, right? And that is destroying, I think, so much. Which brings us to Roe v. Wade as well. And it's like, man, it's so sickening to see how many kids die per year, right? Kids that would be in this world. And I truly...
because of inconvenience.
Right, because of convenience. And don't even talk to me about these fringe issues, which are like less than 1% of the equation, right? Almost all of the abortions that we see are performed because, not only repeat abortions, but they're performed because of convenience, right? Because someone doesn't want a child because they think it's going to be a hindrance to their life at that time, right? Yeah. And the problem is obviously not just abortion, but what comes before abortion, right? Which is the climate and the culture of free sex anywhere, anytime, and this is what we do because we can. Right? Yeah, I don't know. I'll shut up for now, but you guys can chime in. But this to me is like, it's crazy. It's really insane.
Yeah, but even if you go down into that 1%, it still doesn't make sense, right? Right. Like we know Marilyn Paul. Marilyn Paul runs Options for Women here in the Central Florida area.
Can you explain a little bit what that is?
So Options for Women is a really cool program that is run, you know, by donations and different things like that. That helps women through their pregnancy and after pregnancy, right? So they give, you know, they do all kinds of crazy things. Well, not crazy things. Maybe that was a bad way to say it, but crazy things in a good way for my mind. That are very radical to everybody else. But, you know, like they give free pregnancy testing. You know, they take away every aspect of why a woman should get an abortion, right? All your shots during your pregnancy that you need to get for your kid, and all your different things that you go through, like all your medical checkups, ultrasound shots, your shots after your baby's born, they help out with all of that. And the biggest thing is it's all free, right? They pay nothing. Okay, so the coolest thing is where we're at, there is an abortion clinic. And it's actually pretty close to my house.
This is like the only one in the county, right?
The only one left in Polk County. Okay. The only abortion clinic left in Polk County. There are other Planned Parenthoods in Polk County. They do not perform abortions, so this is the only one. And it's so crazy to see God move in this because for the longest time, you know, the abortion clinic was there, and right next to it was a car dealership. I knew the people who used to own the car dealership. It ended up closing down, And he had been asking a ridiculous amount for this piece of property, like $1.5 million or something like that, $1.2 million for like, it was like an acre on, you know, in the city. And
before the house boom and all that.
Yeah,
right?
it was, yeah. So, yeah, this was like, when did that open up? It was
like 2019 or 18, something like that.
Yeah, so 4 years ago or so. Yeah. So this car dealership went out of business, and so here's Planned Parenthood and here's a car dealership. Well, Options for Women owned a building just down the road where they did all their free pregnancy help and stuff like that. And they ended up talking to the guy that owned that property. He said, I'll bring it down to, $1 million and you guys can buy it. Obviously for a donation and, like for a nonprofit that's fully based on donations. They don't just have $1 million sitting in their pocket.
Right.
They ended up talking him down to, I think it was like $500,000. They ended up buying the property right next to the abortion clinic. Yeah. Literally, property lines butt up. And it was so crazy to see that because in my mind, I was like, okay, here's step one.
Yeah.
Right? I can see everything coming down the line, right? Yeah. Like, I can see this property's been bought. They're sprucing it up to where they can do medical, like your ultrasounds and your shots and different things like that. They can do them on site, right? Yeah. They have a huge sign right next to it facing the parking lot of the abortion clinic saying free help with everything that you're going in there to do because you don't think you can afford all of this. You can come over here and get it done for free, and even afterwards we will help you, right? And me and Jaycie have talked to many of the girls who got saved in that parking lot of having an abortion. Because many of them were the babies were products of rape and just unspeakable things, right? And that's a huge, that seems like the pivot point for the abortion culture is, okay, what about the 14-year-old girl who gets raped? She's going to look at that child every day for the rest of her life, and she's going to cry every day, and she's going to think nothing about the rape. She's going to have flashbacks and horror and blah 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 about it, which I'm sure there's some of that, right? I'm not discounting the fact that they can have those things happen, but the beautiful picture that comes from that, right? Like I tell Jaycie all the time, she was talking to someone who was kind of just throwing it out on Facebook. I don't agree with it, and here's why. And he's like, but I seem to agree with it in this section. And it's kind of like, I told Jaycie, it's the people will use it as, I was raped, so I am justified to get an abortion, right? But for me, it's like that just can't, why would if such a horrific act was committed to me, right? Mm-hmm. How does that justify me making a just as horrific act, if not worse, to another human being?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's where I draw the line on that. That just doesn't make sense for me, that I get a pass because something bad has happened to me. Like, if I get shot, okay, and I turn around and shoot somebody else because I've been shot, that doesn't work in any other aspect
unless
of
the person that shot you.
Right. But I'm saying, I get shot and I turn around and shoot someone else.
Right.
Like, that it doesn't add up in any aspect.
Right. And I get it. I mean, it's such a hard thing, right? It's not this black, white, here's, 2 Corinthians 23 and it's just perfectly laid out. This is how we deal with Planned Parenthood. That's not how it goes, right? It's a really hard thing.
Yeah.
And if I were to look someone in the face who had just dealt with incest or dealt with a rape or whatever, oof, that would be really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that this is not an easy thing to go through. And I know many Christians. I know many people that I've gone to church with that have gotten abortions, right? Mm-hmm. That have gone through this. And the pain is always there. Mm. It's always there. Because this is taking out human life. Yeah. It is. Mm-hmm. And there are circumstances where medically it needs to be done, and I understand those as well.
Those are life-saving missions, though, right? It goes from an abortion of an inconvenience to I have to save this life, right? You have another chance to have another child, right? If obviously this person's been alive and we want them to stay alive, right?
Yeah.
And obviously that baby is a precious baby. But in that sense where this person is going to die because of this baby, I totally understand that, right? And in my opinion, that's not an abortion. That's a life-saving mission. It had to happen to save a life, right? So, but the other thing, my ADHD brain, I didn't spin this around when I was talking about those girls earlier. We've probably talked to eight girls who have been through this program, with Maryland and Options for Women and all that stuff. And, what's funny is not one of them ever talks about the fact that they regret that they kept their child. Not one of them. Yeah. And they've come from these situations that people tell me there's no turning back. You always will live in depression and darkness and all this other stuff. It's not like you live like that because you choose to live like that, right? This is something amazing and beautiful that comes out of this, like Beauty for Ashes. I think that's the,
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I was like, maybe I should spin that wrong. But,
no, you're right.
God can take something so broken.
Ashes for beauty.
Yeah. For some reason. So, but like God can take something so corrupt and something so awful that happened and turn it into something amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
And he does all the time. He's done that with us a million times, right? Yeah. Where he's taken our disabilities and our uselessness and turned it into something useful for him, right? He's taken a small idea that we had and turned it into something big, like our YouTube channel, right? We just hit 1 million views the other day on our YouTube channel. Like, that to me is insane. That's insane to me. Like, that we could reach 1 million eyeballs. Like, that is crazy. That God gave us that reach. And he's done it for a specific reason, right? He's told us that we are to reach a specific people group. But he takes things like that, right? And he takes like bad situations and he turns them into something amazing, and we've seen him do that over and over and over and over and over again, and he's going to continue to do it, right? With this, I think it's so hard when I see people that just have the wrong information. And for me, it makes me really, really frustrated when people are just like spewing things that are just downright like false. Like we talk about these ectopic pregnancies where the baby gets stuck in the fallopian tube, right? And this is something where people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Roe v. Wade has been overturned now. All these women are going to die from these ectopic pregnancies and it's going to be horrible. And there's going to be so many dead bodies everywhere, right? Like the streets are going to be filled with dead bodies. There's going to be someone in the alleyway that's going to have to get themselves an abortion with a hanger.
With the hanger thing. That drives me nuts.
Like, no, this is not the case.
Because it's the 21st century.
Right.
Yeah.
It's 2022.
Right.
Abortions are done with a pill, first of all.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
well, depends on where you are in your abortion.
Yeah, early term.
I mean, but like in this circumstance, like especially like ectopic pregnancies, like the majority of ectopic pregnancies end in a miscarriage anyway. And then beyond that, if it is going to grow and if it is going to kill you, then every single state, including the ones that don't allow abortion, will take care of the mother, right? And they'll make sure that it's all good. Like there's no state that's going to be like, oh, you have a baby growing within you, you're too bad. You know, like
because in that sense, both the baby and the mom will die, right? So that's the completely different aspect of it.
Change the camera. My gosh. I tried to signal him.
I was going to, and then you like distracted me. I was like, what's going on? But yeah, I think for sure. I think absolutely that's right. But I get frustrated with the people who just don't understand what they're talking about. And maybe I don't have all the information either, but I can definitely understand enough to at least be educated on the subject and be like, listen, all of these things that you're like freaking out about, like these marches that are going on in California where you're like blocking the freeway because you think that abortions are illegal now, like you live in California. Like you can literally like kill your 2-year-old in California, it feels like, you know, like it's so crazy to me that people don't understand. Like I live somewhere where I believe this to be wrong, right? If we all agree on that and we vote in people that are going to vote that way, right? Or that are going to make legislation that way, like why wouldn't we want it that way, right? But yet people in California are telling me what is right for me and for my wife's body and you know, for everything else. Like it's so crazy to me, but that's the world that we live in. Everybody thinks that, you know, that they are infallible and that they are, you know, they believe what they believe and that's what it is without having a basis of truth. And I think that's what's different about Christianity. But
yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is they use Christianity as a crutch, you know, of like, oh God, if my baby's not going to have a great life, I don't think God would want it to live, because it's not going to fulfill what I think God has for its life, or different things like that. But like 1,600 children were murdered in my backyard, of that abortion clinic last year. And when I read that, it blew me away, the fact that that can happen, right? I don't even know what to say after that. Like, the fact that that can happen in my backyard, like literally in my backyard, blows my mind. But the biggest thing for me is when it's just kind of like what we talked about, like with people that we know that are not Christians, but they live their life however they want, and they justify their life cherry picking out of the Bible, right? Right. It's the same thing with abortion, different things like that. But for me, that's what makes me the most frustrated, that you pretend to be a Christian, and then do these kinds of things, awful things that are so clear in the Bible that they're wrong, right? Like Jaycie knew somebody who was like, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe everything in the Bible. Well, that's not a Christian,
Yeah.
You can't cherry pick, right? God has a set of standards, and those standards have to be met. And not to say that we have to be perfect, right? And not to say, we were talking about abortion one time, and there was a person in the room who had one, and I never want to let anyone who's had an abortion feel like I hate them, right? It's not how I want them to feel, and that's not how I think God would want me to make them feel, right? Like, I still love you, but after that, realize that that was a huge mistake, right? And turn that into something beautiful. Like we started talking about how her testimony could go and talk to these young women who are going to have an abortion, and the regret that she lives with and the torture that's in her head from doing that could be so beneficial to the kingdom of God that it could blow her own mind. Like, who knows where God's going to take that story. So,
and she was in a much different place back then too.
Yes.
Where, she wasn't following God, and God didn't have, that call on her. Well, he did have the call, but she wasn't answering the call in her life, right? And so it was a completely different space. And so now she can look back and she can see those things. And while she is still sad about it, it's like she has a rejuvenated body, and she has a renewed soul, and she is born again now. And we've seen the amazing things that God's done in her,
Yeah. I don't want people to think that I said that as like, if you're a Christian, it's okay to go get an abortion. And then forgiveness and grace is there. Like, like if I forget where in the Bible it talks about, like, if you know what's wrong and you still do wrong,
it's even worse.
That's even worse for you, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't take that as a free pass, right? But like you're saying, if someone who is living a life that's not with God, and she was younger, I don't remember how old she was, but it was in her younger. I think she was in her teens, I think is what she said, but. Don't take that as like a free pass.
Right.
Hope I didn't say it like that, but
no, you're good. Yeah, I think for sure it's it's crazy the world that we live in, and this is just the tip of the iceberg.
We could do this podcast for 8 hours and still be talking.
There's one thing I wanted to talk about with you guys. What about your business? So you run a business called Parker Point that your party planner, wedding planners, event kind of decorators, things like that. You do a bunch of different stuff, and the plan eventually is to have a venue and to be able to do weddings and to help couples do that. And obviously, as Christians, we believe in this idea of marriage being one man and one woman, and kind of walking into that. Let's talk about that for a little bit and talk about how you guys plan to deal with that as you get into your business and all of that. And if you feel uncomfortable, definitely let me know, but I'd love to chat with you guys.
Stop the podcast.
I think for me, it's just like, it goes against what I believe is right. So I don't think that I would be able to be like, okay, this is okay. I would plan your wedding for you and be there and all, like, because it's not like it's like a non-relational thing. Like, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I want you to be the wedding planner at my wedding, like, this is one day of their life. Like, the best day of their life is what you hear all the time. So it's like, you get close with them, you build relationships with them. So I just don't know if I would be able to be willing to, like, put myself out there against what I believe for their beliefs, I guess, or for what they want to do.
Yeah, I totally get that. And luckily for you, there's a precedent for this now, right, where we've talked about before the baker who kind of, denied service for a homosexual couple because he did not feel comfortable doing that from his beliefs, right? Yeah. And the thing is, this only exists in the Christian world, right? Because if you go to a Muslim and you say, hey, you own a restaurant, right? Will you cook this pork dinner for me? Right. It's just not going to happen, and nobody's going to bat an eye, and it's just going to be a denial of service, which is normal for most businesses, right? And so now there's a precedent in that where if it were to come to it, I think that you guys would be, within that precedent for sure. But it is something that we have to think about as we move forward, right? Yeah. And in everybody's businesses, I think. Like, it's something that we struggle with, and Vanessa has struggled with this for years now, where, we have done website development and stuff like that for years, and Vanessa often will come up to a project where she looks at it and it's like either a gambling project or it's a website about homosexuality or it's whatever else, right? And we've had to deal with this multiple times where she's had to drop projects because she just does not feel comfortable, and she can't physically, do the project. But you want to share a little bit about that?
It just comes up where websites are like pro this. There was this big company that wanted me to work with them, and they were like completely opposite of how I think, and I was just like, I can't. Websites are like to promote said company, right? They're mostly like for marketing and promoting and everything. So like, I can't do that. Like, I'm not going to compromise my beliefs just to make money or to, I just can't.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And we've had a lot of conversation about it because Vanessa's like, but we kind of need the money though. You know? And it's like, how do you make that decision? Especially like when we've had clients before that have come to us and they're offering a lot of money. And it's like, how do you turn that down when you still need to put groceries in the fridge and, keep the electricity on and, buy equipment for our YouTube channel? Like, like, how do you turn that down? It's really hard, but, our standards come first, God's standards come first for us. And no matter what, like, he'll take care of us if we're faithful to him. And we truly believe that. There's one more story I wanted to talk about as we kind of get to the end here. There was a really cool story that came out last week, again, from the Supreme Court. Just killing things lately, So let me read this to you and kind of give you some background on this. So this is about a football coach. So the Supreme Court ruled Monday that a former Washington State high school football coach had a right to pray on the field immediately after games. So the 6-3 ruling was a victory for Joseph Kennedy, who claimed that the Bremerton School District violated his religious freedom by telling him he couldn't pray so publicly after the games. The district said it was trying to avoid the appearance the school was endorsing a religious point of view. This is a quote, "Both the free exercise and free speech clauses of the First Amendment protect expressions like Mr. Kennedy's." That's what one of the justices said. So, essentially, Mr. Kennedy is the coach of the JV squad of this high school, right? And he's the assistant coach of the varsity squad. And after every game, like, he would just go by himself to the 50-yard line and he would pray. He would kneel down and he would pray at the end of the game. What was happening was that students, without being prompted, would come and join him to the point where it almost became like a worship service in a way at the end of these games, which is amazing, right? Super cool. And so the school board, like, basically people that would come as visitors to these games would see this happen and they would start to complain. And they would they would report him basically to the school board, and so the school board shut him down basically, and he stopped for a few weeks, and then he's like, no, this is wrong, like I'm going to keep on doing it. So he continued to do it, and then they ended up suspending him and like basically firing him from the position. And so then obviously he took it to court and went to this all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won. So yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I think for me, like, I saw a post when the whole Roe v. Wade thing was overturned, and it was like, stop waving your Jesus flags around. And I'm like, what? I'm like, why can't we wave our Jesus flags around when everywhere you go, there's a LGBT whatever flag literally everywhere you go?
Yeah.
I'm like, we're not waving a Jesus flag around. This is a huge thing. Like, so that to me is just like, why?
Yeah.
You can stand on the sidelines and talk like a sailor, but why can't he pray after the game?
Right.
He's not saying, hey, come pray with me. Like, if students are coming with him, then I say go him.
It would be completely different if he was like, after the games, you are mandatory.
Right.
Like, you have to come and you have to pray with me, right?
Or you're suspended or something.
Right, or you're suspended, or I'm not going to play you, or whatever else, right? This would be completely different, and I'd be against him at that point, right? Because, to be honest with you, even if he was Muslim, right, and he's doing the same practice, I would say, why not? Like, allow him to do it, right? This is his religious freedom to be able to do that, because I want him to be free. And again, like, all this misinformation comes in. It's like, it's the most annoying thing in the world, because people are like, they're like, oh, so we're mandating prayer in school now. It's like, no, that's not what this is about. And then they're like, I heard someone else on Facebook or Instagram or something was posting, and they're like, oh, so teachers can make their class pray now. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about at all. He has his own religious freedom to go do this by himself. Right. His students wanted to join him, and they're completely free to do that, right? Just like any Christian program or Muslim program or Hindu program that was run at a school, right? Like, the students are allowed to come and do that. The teachers are allowed to do that if they want, right? And so it's crazy to me that this was even like a reportable offense. You know, I don't know. It's weird to me, but I'm super glad that guy won. I'm really glad that Roe v. Wade is overturned and that babies' lives are being changed. I said this the other day to you guys, but like, there are babies that are going to be born because of this decision that are going to grow up and do amazing things. And some of them are going to, you know, are going to follow Christ, and they're going to do amazing things for Christ, and I'm so happy for that. I cannot wait for the book that's written, for the movie that's made, for these different things that are going to be prompted by this. You know, I love it. I want to see it. So, and this is just another victory, and I'm glad that we're seeing these. I think, as a last kind of topic, so often as Christians, we focus on the negative things that are happening in the world because we just feel like we're losing all the time. Yeah. You know, like, we feel like every battle that we take on with these courts or with these different battles with people and different people groups, we feel like we're losing all the time because people don't want to choose what's right. They don't want to choose what's righteous. They don't want to choose what's holy. They want to choose what's sinful, right?
What feels good.
What feels good, yeah. And so, as Christians, like, we do see victories like this, right? Where there are these moments of, like, God wins, you know, and he is doing great things in the world, but so often they get shoved down the pipeline because we love to talk about the negativity so much. What do you guys think about that?
Y'all go first.
I don't know. I feel like, because like you said, it feels like we're losing all the time, and it just feels like this is a huge thing, like with the Roe v. Wade and like this guy that was praying on the field and stuff. Like, these are huge things for the kingdom. Like, it's not just like this is one guy praying in a field. Like, that's not what it is. Like, it's a huge thing. So I still think that a small victory is a victory, and even if everything else looks bad around us, there is still genuine, nice, kind, Jesus-loving people around. Yeah. There's not a lot, but I mean, we're still here, so...
Yeah. And God is still good.
Right. Yeah.
Throughout all of it, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things to understand as Christians, we are on the losing end, right? We've read the end of the book where it says, you know, everything's going to turn against us, and the world's going to keep getting worse and worse. It's not going to get better.
We're going to lose until we win.
Right. Like it's going to get much worse than this, and then some, right? And it was funny because like a week ago, I was that person where I was like, man, I'm so defeated. Like one of the leaders in our community, who's in my opinion, a very spiritually sound man, you know, our mayor. And then I read something on the Lakelander that was like he's supporting, like he basically gave like a plaque supporting this church for their contributions to the LGBTQ community.
Right.
A church, you know, and this was a guy that I've always thought, like, when he got voted into to the local government, I was like, man, this is a huge win, blah, blah, blah.
It's a victory, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then after I saw that, I was like,
what happened?
Like, oh my gosh, man! Like, we really are under attack, right? And I ended up texting one of the guys who I volunteer at a ministry called Idols Aside, which is for fatherless and parentless children, where we take them hunting and fishing and different things like that. I know I've talked to you guys about it, but just for the people who are listening,
yeah,
it's a really cool ministry. We work with a lot of foster kids, work with a lot of kids who have dads in the home, sadly, and those dads are not being dads, and they are truly fatherless. They're just as fatherless as the kids who don't have a dad in the home at all. But I ended up texting him, and I sent him a screenshot of it, and I was just like, man, like, this is so hard for me to swallow right now. The fact that someone that I looked up to, that I said, man, I want to be like that guy one day, is now doing these kinds of things.
Right.
And I'm now shifting my whole perspective, saying, nope, okay, that I'm going to start veering off. You know, not that I was idolizing him, but I was like, when I grow up, I want to be strong enough to get into things like this and keep my ground as a Christian. And he was like, you know, I was just like, man, I feel like beaten down and saddened. It really makes me want to give up. I was at a point where I was like, Jaycie would talk about it, and I would literally, like, I just felt this like depression almost come over me, where I was just like overwhelmed, like I don't know what to do. And I was like, feel outnumbered, and he's like, we are outnumbered. The narrow road, it's what should get us so pumped up, right?
Yeah.
Eternity is going to be sweet. Let's bring as many as possible with us. And then he sent Romans 8:18, where it says, yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. And for me, that was just like a reset on my brain of like, okay, yes, we are outnumbered, and it will continue to get worse. But that will just strengthen us, in my opinion. Like, I was letting it get to me where it was breaking me down, when I should turn around and let it, like he was saying, like, jack me back up and say, you know, oh yes, let's take this on full head of steam. So, but yeah, off my soapbox.
I don't know. I have ADHD as well. And I had a few thoughts, but
do you feel like we're in a losing? Do you feel like we're in a losing battle?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're losing? Let's make it more personal. Like, how do you feel like you're doing in the kingdom of God?
Yeah, the world is. I was actually going to say this is like, we're supposed to be the light in the world, right? And too often, the world is darkening us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's too much compromise when it comes to churches, right? That are pro these things that are anti-biblical. Like, yes. So, like, sometimes I feel like, yeah, we are losing, and the world is coming in, and we're allowing the world to shift us and shape us. But we need to stay strong. Like, that's a great verse that you pulled up. Yeah, we just need to stay strong and be in our word, man. Like, it's so frustrating when we don't read our word. It's frustrating when I don't. I haven't been as consistent as I was at one point, right?
Yeah.
But, like, like I'm like forcing myself at this point. I got that study to force me, and I made my friends around me, those closest to me, like to do it with me, so to hold us accountable, because that's what matters, is His word. So like we should be victorious in our lives, and we should be standing separate from the world. But I feel like the church as a whole, I feel like we're failing, right?
Yeah, I think in general, there's a lot of Christians, I'd say probably 80 to 90%, that have never read the whole Bible.
Right.
So they don't even know what they're talking about to begin with. And so it's frustrating, because I can be in a small group, and literally I'll ask who Peter is, or who Paul is, or who David is, or who Joseph is, and people can't answer that question. That to me is insane, that you're even a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Because like these are things that you like. This is the most basic level. If we were Jews in the first century, we would like, at least me and Bryce, right? We would have the first. We would have the Torah memorized. Like by the time we were like 6, right? Like, so why don't we treat the Bible like that? Why don't we give it the reverence and the authority and the like bigness, right? That it needs. Like that to me is crazy. That we don't treat the Bible like that. Like we treat it like these fun little stories that are like kind of cool to know, but it's like these things actually happened, which is why I'm so passionate about Israel as well. Like one of our great YouTube friends, Brandon Robbins, he's in Israel right now. And someone paid for him to go on a trip in summer, which is crazy to me. I don't know if I could go in summer, but he's doing this trip where it's actually really, really interesting. They're doing like 10-mile hikes a day. Like every single day they go on these super long hikes in the wilderness and like through these different areas. And they're seeing some of the sites as well, but like it's almost like a fourth day type of community type thing, like a walk to Emmaus, Tres Dias type community. And so it's very like interesting the way that he's kind of going through stuff and seeing stuff. But he texted me the other day and he's like, you were right. Like I'm seeing things differently because I'm walking through this land and I'm seeing how everything is built and I'm seeing how it works. I'm seeing how everything, like where everything is at, you know, and it's changing my perspective on the Bible. And so for me, like, that's why we're so passionate about Israel. I'm so excited. The Parkers are going with us to Israel in 2023. You guys can come too if you want. Let me plug this real fast. We've got a trip that's coming up in February 2023. Brandon Robbins, the Parkers, us, David Tate from Now Let's Be Honest. We've got some really amazing people coming with us. All the links to the trip are going to be in the description below, as always. And we've got some really awesome people. Some of you that are our patrons that are watching this early, you guys are going to come with us as well, which is going to be super cool. So yeah, definitely sign up for that trip if you're at all able to come. It will change the way that you read the Bible. It changes the way that you think about the Bible. It changes your perspective on Christianity because it makes it real for you, I think, in a lot of ways. But yeah.
How so?
So in my mind, like when you haven't been to Israel, so
No.
So for Jaycie, when you think of Jerusalem, it kind of describe it to me. What do you think of when you think of Jerusalem?
The Bible.
Okay, you think of the Bible?
Yeah, like I'm just so vague. Like,
what do you imagine when you think of Jerusalem?
I don't know. Like, I just think like buildings, like
what type
cross,
of building?
Like old Jesus buildings. I don't know.
Okay,
I don't
okay.
like.
So
I
like,
don't know.
this is what I mean. So, for example, for Jaycie, she has these fictional buildings in her mind of things that she
like
might think are accurate, but she's not quite sure, and maybe they're kind of vaguely Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, I remember the cobblestone roads. I remember the smell of the market as they're butchering meat through the back alleys. I remember running through and seeing all of the vendors, right? I remember seeing the Western Wall and seeing the prayers that are stuffed into them. I remember seeing the base stone of the temple, right? I remember seeing the old and the new city, the walls that were resurrected around the city as it was rebuilt, right?
The Garden of Gethsemane. The
Garden of Gethsemane, where there's 2,000-year-old olive trees, right? Yeah. And I know the locations of these things. The Eastern Wall that the Muslims have boarded up because they're afraid of Jesus returning, right? Different things like that. Like, these are the things that I think of, and they're memories for me. So instead of having a moment of imagination,
right, it's real.
It's a memory that I'm remembering when I read the Bible, right? So when I think of Capernaum, we're going to go to Capernaum and we're going to see Peter's house, right? That he lived in. Not only that he lived in, but that Jesus lived in during that time, right? There's a church that's built above it. And if that's not Peter's house, let's say, oh, they got the wrong house, we don't think that that's Peter's house, then there is a synagogue that Jesus 100% would have stood in and taught in, right? That's like 30 feet away from Peter's house. So like these things that we see are like places that we know for a fact Jesus was. Right? And we read about it in the scriptures. And so when we look at the scriptures, it becomes a whole new realm for us. And again, that's why I'm so passionate about it. Because I think it changes the way that you believe. It makes it real for you. It's more than just a story. It's more than just a song. It's more than just a religion. It's more than just Christianity. It's a real relationship with the God that created the world, that sent his son to die on a cross in Jerusalem, right? Yeah. Like,
that's
crazy.
why I'm so excited, because everyone's like, oh, it's so cool, you should go. And I'm like, well, okay, how's it cool? Like, what? They're like, it just makes it so real. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, because I've never been, but I'm so excited to go, because like, that's what I want to remember. I don't want to be like, oh, I just remember the pictures from my Jesus Kid book. Like, I don't want to remember that, because it's not real, it's imagination. So
and we're gonna have some amazing moments, like we're gonna be sitting in the Garden Tomb, which is this area where they believe Golgotha to be. It's more the Protestant location, and we're gonna do some worship there. We're gonna be on a boat on the Sea of Galilee. We're gonna do worship there as well, and just be able to sit. And
that was probably one of my favorite when I went, was probably being on the Sea of Galilee, because it was like because the story about, you know, Jesus walking on water, like that's a really cool story for me. And whenever I was out there, and we stayed in Tiberias, which is right on the Sea of Galilee, and it was cool because we spent most of our time there. And when we went out on the Sea of Galilee and things like that, it was like everything just started clicking, because, you know, that area was where Jesus did the majority of his ministry. And it is such a cool area. There's so much history. And, you know, my dad did, you know, tours for Imagine Tours and Travel, which is who we're going through. And he did that for a number of years. So he's been to Israel more times than he can probably count. But he knows a lot of the people over there, and a lot of the people who are discovering these new sites. Like he knows some of the people that discovered a lot of the key sites over there and are continuing. Like, he knows people that are digging up sites right now that, as we speak, are being dug up, and they already think they know what they are and what time they were, like where in the Bible that this story comes into play here, and different things like that. So that's the coolest part, and that's just going to continue to happen. So
I think of things like the City of David. You know, scholars told us that this place didn't exist, but the Bible said that it did, right? And then they found it. And then scholars were like,
liars!
And so it's been really funny, because as they discover more of the Bible becomes more realistic, and it becomes more scientifically proven, instead of like the stories that we've had, right? But it's crazy. Anyway, thank you guys so much for this conversation. Really, I think this podcast is going to be a place where we can just speak about this kind of stuff. And this is eventually going to be up on its own channel on YouTube and have its own kind of stuff. And so, you know, if you guys want to see these podcasts early, by the time you're seeing this, it's probably actually really far ahead for our patrons. And so our patrons are going to be the first to kind of see this and give us feedback about what they want to see. And so if you guys want to join our Patreon, then we would love to have you over there. There's a lot of extra content, including early access to this podcast that's going to be over there. So anyway, what is a woman? Who knows?
Who knows?
A grown adult female.
A grown adult female, yep. Anyway, love you guys very much. Hit that red button for me. We'll do an outro. Hope you like this video. See you guys on the next one.
Peace.